everybody. Thank you once again for joining us for Tech Safe here at the WCCA cable station in Worcester, Massachusetts. A big shout out to our wonderful producer, Adam Rice. And we have a guest today that we've not heard from in the past. Her name is Shari Champagne, coming to us from Louisiana, where they have just dug themselves out of a very most unexpected blizzard that they're not supposed to be getting in that part of the world. So Shari is very gracious to give us her time today because I know they've got a lot going on down there. But she has some direct experience with the wireless radiation issue. So for episode 48, we're going to hear from Shari and how she learned that wireless technology has its downside as well as its benefits. Shari, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, and thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure. It is a bit chilly here, and we have our very first, 8 inches of snow, so that's also fun. And like you said, it as far as technology and where we see it going right now, I personally, of course, for years we've always used technology. We've seen the advantages and even more advantages, and we see what its use is for and how useful it is. However, in the recent past, in learning, when we had the computers going into the classrooms, and I began wondering, well, if this Wi-Fi, because I was educated a bit on the dangers of Wi-Fi after years ago thinking, what is all this about this, 5G stuff, and then I started educating myself. And so for several years, just learning, how to be safe for myself. And then trying to share that with others and things like that. And then we saw the launch of the Chromebooks in the schools and things like that. So I became a bit concerned about what we were doing in the schools and what the Chromebooks were and how they were being operated, whether it was a hardwire or Wi-Fi and whatnot. And I learned that it was all Wi-Fi, and we had routers in the classrooms and the smart boards were in there. And so I began educating myself on that, specifically the Wi-Fi in the classrooms and the dangers and bringing that to our superintendent and things like that. And then we saw the launch of the 5G towers. And in my community and around in this area, it was an almost unbelievable launch because we literally were having them go up on every corner. And so I started asking questions about that in general. And then we had Hurricane Ida. And a lot of these towers, the fences and stuff were down. So we saw the antennas going up after the storm. And so a lot of residents just thought, they were repairing the tower. It's regular stuff, And then there's a tower that's directly over my animal sanctuary. And then there's a tower that's about 1,500 feet away and another one 3,000 feet away. And then all at the same time, I saw them putting the antennas and stuff on these towers. And I became more curious, and I asked if it was 5G. And the maintenance workers that were there originally didn't speak English, so I had to wait a bit for them to come back, for the other crews to come back. And then I asked them, and they said, indeed, it was 5G. And I asked them, just kind of facetiously, well, is this safe? Because it's, 20 feet away from our back doors, And the guy said, well, kind of jokingly, it depends on who you ask. And so the towers took a bit to get the equipment on and whatnot. So I was asking questions. I was involved with the planning and zoning, inquiring about this, permits and all of the legalities and regulatory information. There was zero. So they had zero information about any of the towers. And then soon after they went up, I got really sick in my petting area because I have a petting area at my sanctuary. And then I started having heart issues outside in the petting area. And then one day I passed out and I woke up in my petting area. I didn't know what it was. I went to the doctor. And of course, initially they had no idea what it could be. And then I did more research. And then I started asking if the towers were live. And they said they were live. And then soon after that, I had 2 of my exotic chickens just die. They were out in the same area where I passed out, and they were laying there deceased. And I thought, this just can't be real. Maybe this is really happening, and this is the 5G towers that may be doing this. So I started doing research, and then started researching for meters that I might be able to test it myself because, I went through the avenues of FCC and all of the regulatory, folks that you think that you have to get in touch with. They had no answers. Planning and zoning said, yes, they have no permits at that time. They didn't have any regulatory information, had no idea what was going on. And then I got sick again. They put 3 towers up near my home and in front of my office. And then I became much sicker. So having a personal experience where before I thought, I don't really know about this. And then I was diagnosed with radiation exposure. My doctor didn't really think that could be possible. And then I told him what was going on. He had never heard of it. Now he is very well educated on it and what's going on. But initially, when I found out, I was diagnosed with radiation exposure. And then I was diagnosed with a few other things, with heart palpitations, AFib. I was having my ears are still ringing. They ring constantly. And so that health, path began. And of course, I've seen several of the environmental doctors. They diagnosed me with, electromagnetic hypersensitivity syndrome. And so we've come to electromagnetic radiation syndrome now. And that is the actual diagnosis for what they diagnosed me with. So all of that being said, now I am on the path of research and helping others understand. In my community, there is no regulatory information available for, I think, around 70 towers that are now up directly over our homes. And they all cite FCC guidelines saying that there's no testing, so they have nothing to say that this is safe. So I go around and I test. I test all of the towers. I've tested from Louisiana to Alabama out to Texas. And I can tell you that the towers are approximately every 2,500 feet throughout every state. So when you look around you, that's why you're seeing them everywhere you go. It's everywhere. And so I have learned to protect myself. I've actually made the garments that I have to wear, and hat inserts and ponchos that I have to wear. I can no longer go to my office because the frequency is so extreme there. And then they put a smart meter on the building. So it kind of made it much more difficult to go to the office. So now I find myself, I research everything that I feel like everyone else should know that is also happening to me. So I feel like when I'm sharing that information, it's kind of firsthand. And when I'm around a cell phone, like an iPhone 12, I actually have an iPhone 12. It has to stay in a Faraday pack. And I actually just got another phone after I realized I didn't know that my phone was considered to be one of the most unsafe. I didn't know that until I learned, that it was. And so now I'm getting a new phone, but for so long I've been using one of the most, I guess you can say, radioactive phones. I mean, it's most dangerous. I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
how you would, say that.
Yeah, I think when we see those ratings on different phones, they're going off of SAR, which is the specific absorption rate of this radiation into our skin. And that's only based on a heat model. How much heat would it take to raise the temperature of the skin in 6 minutes or 30 minutes? And while that has some bearing, what the science is now showing us is it's really not about the heat, because the FCC has allowed public radiation exposure limits up here. The science has now proven that you don't have to have heat to have harm. You are going to be exposed to unhealthy levels at hundreds of thousands of times below what the FCC is still allowed to do. And we know that the FCC has been sued for ignoring literally 11,000 pages of scientific evidence of harm entered into the public record. And the court, DC Circuit Court of Appeals, found the FCC guilty. They said they were arbitrary and capricious in reaffirming their 1996 public radiation exposure limits. And I had to go look up what is arbitrary and capricious. It means they didn't do their homework. They're just saying, oh yeah, it's fine. And then, Yeah, and then we look at the Harvard report called Captured Agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. So there's no cavalry coming. Public policy is usually the last piece to fall into place once enough people learn about this, start sharing with their loved ones, and then together as a voice, we speak up to empower our local schools, our local municipal authorities, our state level authorities, and so on up the chain, because there is no cavalry coming. There's big money, big business. The telecom industry is one of the largest and most powerful in the world. And so we as citizens have to really start asking ourselves, well, why don't I sleep right at night? Where's all this anxiety and depression coming from? Why are the children's behaviors just off the charts these days?
Yes.
And we know we can't keep pulsating ourselves with radio frequency microwaves and expect things to be normal, because they're not. And Shari, I am just so sorry for everything that you've gone through, and that you found your beautiful, chickens out there with no life left in them. And we know through the modeling that scientists, for example, like Dr. Om Gandhi has done, he has shown when you put a cell phone up to a fully formed adult skull, that radiation is penetrating into our brains about this far. On a 10-year-old child, it's about this far, and on a 5-year-old child, that radiation is coming across the entire brain. And so inch per inch, pound for pound, a small creature like your beautiful chickens don't stand a chance.
You're right. Yeah,
they can't dissipate it over any further tissue because they're little tiny beings.
And I have two other chickens that have tumors currently. And I've had 4 horses die in the same spot. They just died, and they dropped dead quite literally in the same vicinity where it has been tested to be extreme. And so the FCC said that's they really don't know how that would be, but at some point it's basically, it's your problem, because they know that the telecom industry is regulated. It's essentially what FCC said.
Oh, yeah, they all say that. So long as it's within the FCC guidelines, we're fine. But they're not based on biological testing. And none of our federal agencies have ever done the proper review of the science that is very clear that this is a neurotoxin. It is an immunosuppressant. It's a carcinogen. It causes infertility. It causes heart dysregulation. It just goes on because we are electrical beings. Our cells whisper to each other all the time to communicate, to keep all of our organs and functions running properly. And the earth is, I know you've discovered probably Schumann's resonance already. The earth pulses this beautiful healing energy at 7.83 times a second. And every living thing on the planet is meant to be connected to that natural energy. And that helps us to regulate our own biochemistry. Well, when we got so fancy with digital technology, we started in this megahertz range. So 7.83 times per second equals 7.83 hertz. When we started with like 2.4 gigahertz, that's 2.4 million cycles per second that we're getting spiked with microwave radiation. And now for 5G, they're bumping it up into using all those other frequencies, but adding on a new layer of gigahertz range. And giga means a billion cycles per second. We are getting jackhammered with microwaves. And how they can fit a billion of anything into a second, I don't know. That's way beyond me. But we know scientifically that this is biologically hazardous. So Shari, hats off to you for everything you're doing to try and educate those around you. Can you walk us through the conversations that you've had with authorities in your area? How'd you open those conversations? How'd it go? What lessons did you learn? And what we might do if we pluck up the courage to try and have those conversations ourselves.
Absolutely. It's also very important that you make them aware, because it's unfortunate that a lot of our leaders they're unaware. And if you use Google and you actually Google, is electromagnetic frequency in your phone, or, in any product, is it dangerous? Oftentimes you get something that says, not really, it's fine, you're fine. And a lot of people do that, and they use one, let's just say, search engine, and they get the same information. So when I educate them, a lot of them are more receptive. We have a few senators here that we have introduced to the knowledge, which they did not know. Several of our state representatives did not know. They had no idea. They had no idea that their phones, because some of them have multiple phones, and some of them keep multiple phones in their pockets, and I break out the handy dandy, meter, and show them, well, you're kind of on fire right now. Your pants are on fire, not quite literally, and educate them on the frequency from their phones, the routers that they're sitting next to. And then they translate that into, maybe there is more to hear about this, and they're more open to it. So if you kind of explain that to them in a way that it's not as threatening or accusatory or in any way saying that you did this, but more like, can you help us fix this? As a group, some of them are very standoffish, especially, if they have some type of a financial tie to maybe a contributor or something like that. But oftentimes, if you just educate them, I find that that's been the best avenue for giving them the information and saying, would you be willing to help even get some more answers? And a lot of times they are, and they often don't know that road. So we kind of travel that together, so to speak.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I share the same experience with you. When I first fell down the rabbit hole, I started going to our state house, and we had a number of bills filed here that were assigned to different committees. One by one, I found every legislator on those committees, and I went in and asked for a meeting. And I always started with, can you share with me what you might know about the biological effects of today's wireless technology?
Oh, yeah.
And I will tell you that with the exception of one person, nobody I spoke to at our state house had any idea that this came to market with no safety testing and that it's extraordinarily harmful. And the one gentleman who said, well, I may know a little bit. Why don't you tell me what you came here to tell me? And we met for about 40 minutes. And at the end of it, he said, he was Russian. And he said, my father was the physicist who brought the crew into Chernobyl after it blew. So he said, I grew up knowing that these man-made energies can be beneficial, but they can be very detrimental as well. But I kid you not, I probably spoke to hundreds of legislators over the years, and none of them have had any idea. So I love your approach that you go in collaboratively. And two things that have helped me to bring them into the conversation more safely is to show them the legal fine print in that iPhone, right? And for those who haven't done this with us, if you go into settings, scroll down just a little bit and hit general, then you go all the way down to legal and regulatory, hit that. On the next screen, about 4 down, you see RF exposure. This is this radio frequency microwave radiation that they politely call energy because it's a man-made energy form. And it tells you right on that first big paragraph that this was tested at a device from the body. So if you're sticking it in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt pocket or your pants pocket or your yoga waistband or your back pocket, you're exceeding the government guidelines for public radiation exposure that were set back in 1996 before we had this explosion of all wireless everywhere. So we're doing our best still. Odette Wilkins with the National Call is working at the federal level with Charles Froman. A bunch of us are working at the state level. We just got 6 bills introduced in Massachusetts, and they're making their way through the first steps in the process. Once we have the real assigned bill numbers, we'll do a program on the 6 bills here. And we keep educating our local board of health, our zoning board, our planning board, our school committees. But I think, honestly, having been up and down this whole chain of command for the last 12 years, I really think that we will see the most meaningful change when we get together with one another at the grassroots level and build that out, because one voice, that was my hardest lesson learned, is one voice is really easily swept under the rug when people have so much on their plate today. So don't go it alone, and that's why we're encouraging, and Shari, thank you for being part of our 10-town pilot program, but we're encouraging, make a list, jot down who in your community do you think would want to know about this invisible exposure that could be harming themselves and their loved ones. Maybe it's your girlfriends, your guy friends, your relatives. Maybe it's a civic organization that you like or that you belong to. You know, do you have a sustainability group? Do you have Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and the Lions and, you know, everybody who gives their time so generously to volunteering? Those are the right kind of people. Then let's get together and watch Generation Zapped. It's an award-winning film. It was selected as the best documentary at the Washington, D.C. Independent Film Festival. It was chosen best documentary by the Women's Independent Film Festival, and it's picked up a whole bunch of other accolades. Libraries have it in their streaming services of Canopy and Hoopla. So we're going to do our best, Shari and I, with these other champions scattered across North America to see what'll happen if we really give our best effort at the grassroots. Amidst everything else that's already going on in our lives, none of us ever imagined we would have to take time to address this, but the scientists are ringing the bell and saying this is perhaps the leading public health issue of our time. This is big tobacco on steroids, because we can't smell it, we can't taste it, we can't, well, some are hearing the microwave hearing. Others are feeling it, but they don't know to connect the dots. And we're so grateful that we now have an international medical conference. It's called the EMF Medical Conference 2021. For a couple of years, there were 24.5 continuing education credits associated with it. When that period expired, Elizabeth Kelly, who was the executive director of that conference, we have taken the entire conference and put it online at no charge. So when you go talk to your doctor about this, if you go to my website at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, on my resources page, near the top, one of the first bullets is a letter that you can print out and hand to your healthcare practitioner, because it's going to be news to most of them. But they will see, you know, brain surgeons, all sorts of medical experts saying this is real, and here's how you can learn to recognize, diagnose, treat, and prevent these microwave sickness symptoms. And Shari, I am so relieved that your doctor was receptive to this, and that you knew that there are codes, IDC codes already exist for man-made radiation exposures. So it's mind-boggling when people first learn. So
it definitely is. And so it's been a journey. And so much like many things, you know, if you learn from it and try to do all you can, you know, to make it better or whatever that is, that's kind of what I'm doing. You know, making lemonade out of lemons kind of thing. And so in educating others, and I feel like at this point, when I went searching, you know, for people like you, and I found you and learned so much from just the things that I thought I knew what was going on, and then, you know, everyone else around me at the time said, you were one of those warriors out there. That I said, yes, you know, this is real. This is something that's truly happening. It's not just here. It's not just in one place. So that's where I knew that maybe I could help not just myself, but others with just learning, you know, learning as much as I can, sharing that. And just like you said, Generation Zapped, it's so educational for so many. That when I recommend this to people, they learn so much more outside of, you know, different terms of, you know, how they learn, you know, whatever that is, whether it be a short video or some visuals or whatever. They learn that through the Generation Zapped, and that's a very good tool. And so I do. I try to share that with as many people. I'm like, did you see this? I mean, this is not. I'm not telling you this. Just go watch it.
Exactly.
And so I do. So yeah, it's been very. It's
Yeah,
I met with you as well.
right, and I met a man recently whose sweet, sweet grandson has autism. And as soon as I mentioned Generation Zapped, he emailed me right back and he said, I'm getting that movie and I'm going to go watch it. So it's a great tool. And I just want to remind all of our viewers that we keep the education coming. We base it on science. We're not making this stuff up. So I do a free public education webinar every month, and Shari will be my co-host for the month of January on the 30th of January from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. I'm so excited to have you back. But I'll go through a presentation that walks us through the science, the risks, the symptoms, and most importantly, what we can do to protect ourselves. And Shari, I am so grateful that you found the ALARA principle. So our Centers for Disease Control has a webpage up on man-made radiation, but so far they're only acknowledging the ionizing radiation, which is powerful enough to break the atom and cause harm, like the sun, the gamma rays, and X-rays. The same principles that they have on that website for ionizing radiation apply to what we now know is called non-ionizing, non-thermal, low-level, man-made radio frequency radiation. All of that, it's Wi-Fi, right? So, but the same principles apply. One is create as much distance as you can from something that's radiating. Two, spend as little amount of time as you can radiating yourself. And three, if you can't get away from it, do your best to shield. And I know Shari has already adopted some of these practices with the shielding. It's not done lightly. You have to do it very carefully because you don't want to get yourself trapped inside basically a Faraday cage with something that's radiating near you, because that's going to hit the metal fibers in the fabrics or whatever and bounce back and hit you some more. So there are shielding paints, there are foils to be used in construction and stuff that can be really good, but you really should get a building biologist to work with you on that. Don't try and do it yourself on that, because it could come back to double whammy you. So Shari, I want to thank you so much. This is our 28-minute time, but we look forward to having you with us at the end of the month, and keep doing what you're doing, and thank you, and send people our way because we're here to help. So
absolutely. I definitely will. And thank you so much for having me. And I definitely look forward to later on this at the end of the month and next month and for our next meetings and all that good stuff. So thank you so much. And I hope everyone out there is awake and aware and paying attention. Thank you so much.
All right, everybody. Have a Tech Safe day, and we'll see you next time at Tech Safe WCCA TV. Bye-bye.